Hey, what's up everybody? Making another video and picking up kind of where I left off. In my previous video, I was talking about the beginning of 2005 and just kind of painting the picture of what the DDR community was back then, at least from my perspective, from what I remember. And this video is going to be in the groove too. I was saying to myself, like, why would I make an In the Groove 2 video? I would never call myself an In the Groove player. I wasn't an In the Groove player really. But in the storyline of DDR, from when I played, which was about 2002 to 2006, 2005, 2006 has a little bit of meaning, and I'll make a video on that too. But in that storyline, there was In the Groove and In the Groove 2, and I already made it In the Groove 1 video. So where do I want to go with this? In the Groove 2 came out in 2005. From the community at this time, from what I remember in New York, and just the DDR dancing game community in general, started to split. It was like there were some people who were playing In the Groove, and there were some people who were playing DDR. And then there were people who played both. Because at this time, really, In the Groove was being touted as like a DDR replacement, because Konami wasn't making any more DDR mixes. And because In the Groove 2 was a lot more refined than the first one, a lot of people were just moving away from DDR Extreme. I spoke about that a little bit in some of my videos, some of my earlier videos, but you know, In the Groove had more difficult songs, it had different options. It was basically a newer game, and it was similar enough that if you played DDR, really aside from like just on a general level, aside from the lines that In the Groove had, it was almost the same game. It wasn't, but like if you look at it from that point of view, it wasn't different like Pump It Up, where Pump It Up had like, it was a 5-panel game and the arrows were diagonal, and In the Groove wasn't so different. Let's see, in New York City, Coney Island got In the Groove 2. Chinatown Fair got In the Groove 2, and from what I remember, that was like one of the more popular spots to play. They may have been the first, I think they were the first arcade to get In the Groove 2. Now, In the Groove 2 had a dedicated cabinet. And like I explained in my In the Groove 1 video, In the Groove 1 didn't, as far as I know, it didn't have a dedicated cabinet. But In the Groove 2 had its own cabinet. In the Groove 1, you bought like the kit and you installed it on the DDR machine. But In the Groove 2, I think you could do that with In the Groove 2, but at first most people just, like most arcades, got their own cabinet for In the Groove 2. So Chinatown Fair had a DDR Extreme cabinet, and it had an In the Groove 2 cabinet. Coney Island got In the Groove 2. Broadway City was already closed, so Broadway City had nothing to do with In the Groove 2. I don't remember or recall if Laser Park had In the Groove 2. They may have, and I just don't remember. I don't remember playing In the Groove 2 at Laser Park like that. Port Authority got In the Groove 2. And then South Beach Arcade in Staten Island got In the Groove 2. And that was also a really good spot to play. Like, a lot of people played there. And like I said, Chris Fire and Dino played at South Beach Arcade. That was their home arcade. And South Beach Arcade got In the Groove 2 as well. Yeah, like I played mostly at Chinatown Fair from what I remember. I did go to South Beach Arcade to play In the Groove, because even though I lived in Brooklyn, it was about 45 minutes or so for me to get from my house where I lived to South Beach Arcade, depending on if the buses and the trains, everything connected. So I could get there at a reasonable amount of time. So I'll go to South Beach Arcade, I'll go to Chinatown Fair to play In the Groove. But I do remember playing mostly at Chinatown Fair. I'm trying to think like the songs that I remember. Maybe I should preface this video. I mean, I already started it, but to say like, I'm not really qualified to talk about In the Groove as a whole. But I do feel like I have to speak on it because it was part of this history. So my memory is a little hazy. But the songs that I do remember, like all the In the Groove 1 songs were popular. So you had like as an In the Groove 1 recap, Charlene was a popular song, Delirium. I remember Chris Beast playing a lot of the Disconnected songs, or Disconnected Hyper, Disconnected Disco, or whatever they're called. Hardcore of the North was popular. July was popular. I remember a lot of people playing Lemmings on the Run, and I remember Sarcastic Mofo playing In the Groove too, and I remember him playing Lemmings on the Run a lot. Mythology, Pandemonium, Vertex, which were both 13 footers or 13 bars, whatever you want to call them, in the Groove too. You had all the good players that played DDR in New York City played In the Groove 2 at first. Me, Fat Axel, Chris Fire, Dino, BigMatt. We all played In the Groove 2. No one, as far as I remember, no one was really on Tell yet. I remember Tell, I think it was rated a 12 bar or a 12 footer, but that song was hard, man. I would have much rather played Vertex, Pandemonium, Summer Speedy Mix than play Tell. Tell used to kick everybody's ass at first. It was really, really hard. So I don't remember people being on Tell too much like that. Utopia, and then some of the lesser skilled players would play like the easier stuff, Bend Your Mind, and I used to try to play Torn a lot. Like when I was trying to I was like, let me try to quad star something. I used to play that song Torn. It was like a really easy song, so I used to play that. But those are the In the Groove 1 songs, and I think all the In the Groove 1 songs were put on In the Groove 2, which was cool. And then for In the Groove 2, you have Blood Rush, which was like kind of their version of PSMO, but it wasn't as hard as PSMO, but it was like a lot of twisting, and so they have Blood Rush. I remember David Togo playing Blood Rush a lot on 1X. I don't remember if he was doing No Bar too. He probably was, because I think he used to be really 1X No Bar. And to be clear, this is one of the times that we abandoned playing 1X, because we were kind of just dipping our toes, and I say we, I really mean me and Fat Axel. Like, we were kind of dipping our toes in the groove, and so playing on, there was no emphasis to play on 1X. Like, the game didn't push that philosophy, and with DDR it was like that up until a certain mix. Up until DDR Max, DDR was 1X, and then even when you played the Oni courses were on 1X on DDR. So it felt like DDR was pushing that, and then Bag came out, and Bag was, stamina wise, like I said, it wasn't a 10 footer, but what they tried to do with Bag, it was only difficult if you played it on 1X. So DDR kind of pushed that, whether you agree with it or not. DDR, there was an element of 1Xism in DDR, if you want to call it that. But In the Groove didn't have that. I think, like, as part of their way to like circumvent Konami being mad at them for copying DDR, I think that the default was 1.5x in terms of like the speed modifiers. So there was really no heavy push to play In the Groove on 1X. David Togo did play on 1X. I didn't play In the Groove on 1X like that. Sometimes I would play songs on 1X, but I wasn't really like, I didn't like get into it like that. And aside from David, I didn't really know too many people who did. We just all played on speed, and that was that, you know. Then there was Destiny and Hardcore Symphony. Those were two of the songs that I did like to play when In the Groove came out. There was The Terminator, which I'll get to a little bit later, but that was a difficult, I think that was like a 12 bar or 12 footer. Energizer, there was Monolith. And I don't know if this was like popular in the Groove community, but Monolith, there were a couple of Monolith edits that floated around New York City when people were playing In the Groove 2. And I remember we had a friend who played DDR named Javi, and I remember him, like, he was like, I want you to try a couple of these edits, when I was still like in my prime and I could still read arrows really well and my stamina was up. And he made me play at least one I feel like it was like two of them, but he made me play this Monolith edit that he said was like, I think I remember him saying it was fairly popular, and I thought it was cool. I didn't really like the original steps to Monolith, but I remember playing a couple of Monolith edits when I did play In the Groove. There was Summer Speedy Mix, which was another 13 bar, and I believe that song was 190 beats per minute, 200 beats per minute, or like, it was fast, and I think that was one of the reasons why it was a 13 bar. And then there was the song, I'd say my favorite overall song in the Groove 2 was Know Your Enemy. I thought the steps were okay, very repetitive like a lot of the other steps in the Groove, but I did like the song. And I used to play that song on modifiers all the time. I used to love playing that song on modifiers. The modifier, the options menu on In the Groove and In the Groove 2 was also something that you couldn't ignore. It was very unique. It was obviously like pulled from Stepmania, because I think that's where they got the source code from. And they had all kinds of weird options, man. You play Boomerang where the arrows come down and then they come back up. You can play Split where there's like two arrows on the top of two stationary arrows on the top of the screen and two stationary arrows on the bottom of the screen. So you're basically playing regular and reverse at the same time. Yeah, I used to love playing In the Groove 2 options. These are In the Groove 1 songs, but I think Hand of Time was on In the Groove 1, and I used to like playing that on options. And I used to like playing Hand of Time and Bend Your Mind, because they weren't that difficult. So I would initially, when In the Groove 2 came out, I was like, if I'm gonna play this, I'm gonna play on options. So I would play those songs to build up my ability to read the arrows. I used to play on whatever it was, like Bumpy, where the stationary arrows and the moving arrows would like go to the base. And then I would play on Random, which was In the Groove's version of Shuffle, where like the arrows were put in a different configuration, so the algorithm would switch, like up would be left and left would be right or whatever. And then they had one called Random where they didn't even use an algorithm, like every arrow was like in different places, and you would get like 5 of the same arrows in a row, and it would be a 16th note. So like Blender was pretty cool to play on. I'm probably forgetting people, but the people who I remember playing In the Groove 2 a lot, who kind of pushed the game forward, again, like my memory for In the Groove 2 is not really where it is in terms of like the history, and like I would like to interview somebody who feels, maybe BigMatt. I feel like Matt is probably one of the best people to interview about this. But the people I remember pushing In the Groove 2 forward at first was BigMatt, Sarcastic Mofo, Chris Beast, Chris Fire, and Dino did play In the Groove 2 a lot as well, from what I remember. I don't remember how they felt about it, but I do remember them playing, and I remember them getting good scores on it. So, there was that. It was cool. Like, it was cool to have this new DDR-like game in our arcades to be able to play, and everybody in the country got In the Groove 2 as well. So that was cool initially. It was like a cool novelty to have the game. So I just want to emphasize that, because like the next couple segments of what I talk about is not going to be that tone, but I just want to emphasize it was cool at first. Like, I thought it was cool at first that we had In the Groove 2. Here's what I didn't like about In the Groove 2. And I mentioned a lot of this in my In the Groove 1 video, but it really has to be, it can't be overstated. It was off sync. It was off sync. It was off sync. Like, Everything was late in the game. I'm not a musician. I didn't take music theory in college. But I was, at this point in time in 2005, before the Jacob Javits tournament, I was one of the best DDR players in the world. If you're talking about DDR, I was one of the best DDR players in the world. So it was kind of like being gaslit, because a lot of the people who liked In the Groove and wanted to forcefully move away from DDR didn't really want to acknowledge this. But I knew it was late by playing it. In the Groove 1 was late. It was very noticeably late. In the Groove 2 wasn't as late as In the Groove 1. So it was easier to play, especially if you had it on speed. The problem that I had though was that because DDR and In the Groove, these were music games. They were rhythm games. They were music games. So it wasn't just about the sight reading. This wasn't like some kind of like, I don't know, phone app game with Parappa the Rapper or something like that. Like even those games, like even Parappa the Rapper is a music game and you have to kind of stay on the beat. But like that was a fun game. These games were like these highly competitive, supposedly accurate games, and In the Groove 2 was late, and I didn't like that. The In the Groove 2 machines, they almost all of them, as far as I remember, came with USB slots, and that was their version of memory card slots. So you can put a USB, a thumb drive in your computer, load up Stepmania, get like an In the Groove 2 song on Stepmania, and then make an edit for it. So they all had the ability to do that. You can make your own edit. It was much easier to make edits than DDR, because DDR you had to have like a PS1 memory card and put it in your PlayStation 1 and make the edit, or download the edit from the internet and get some kind of reader. I don't know if I've ever actually done that. I used to convert a lot of my DDR edits. I would just look at a step chart and like spend 30 or 40 minutes like punching in the arrows. But I think you could download edits like through like a converter, where you can put a PS1 memory card in your computer and put the edit on your memory card. But it was a lot easier to make and get edits for In the Groove 2. And I do want to talk about my take, and I did speak on this in my In the Groove 1 video, but I'll talk about it in a couple minutes, about how edits for me proved that this game was late. So I didn't like that it was off sync. So there's that. The machine, and this next point is more personal to me. The machine was very different than DDR, and I didn't notice that at first. The bar, I believe, was higher than the In the Groove 2 machine bar was higher than the DDR bar, and I think that the pad was bigger. And when I used to play In the Groove 2 especially, I would get tired a lot faster, and I didn't understand why. I just didn't I just, maybe because a lot of times when that happened with DDR, it would just be the arcade. Sometimes the air in the arcades would be thick. Like if I played at Mars 2112 or NYDS, it always felt like the air was thick. I had like a theory that if there was like a carpet underneath, a certain kind of rug or carpet under certain DDR pads, like it made it more or less bouncy, and that affected how it was. So at first I just maybe thought like Chinatown Fair's In the Groove machine, like I don't know, like maybe the air, because people used to go to Chinatown Fair and they had like bad body odor. So, but after a while I realized that the bar was higher, and I didn't notice that at first. And then I felt like the pad was a little bit bigger, and that may not be the case. I thought I remember measuring it at one point, and maybe that's like, maybe I meant to do that and I never got around to it. It's been so long, but the bar was definitely different, and I also didn't like that. That didn't mean that the game was worse. That just meant that was an In the Groove 2 machine, but that kind of threw me off as well. A few years later, Actually, not even a few years later. It was a few years later that I did play in the Groove 2, or like a modified version of it on a DDR machine. But I think even when I was still playing, somewhere had In the Groove 2 on a DDR machine, and I remember playing and doing so much better. They're not even playing with the bar. Like usually I would use the bar and I would play with speed on In the Groove 2. But playing In the Groove 2 on a DDR machine, I did so much better. But that was a personal thing that used to throw me off. It didn't mean the game was bad just because of that. The machine just didn't feel as comfortable to me. I didn't like that the songs were gimmicky. I should say that some of the reasons why I'm saying these things is my opinion, but this is also a lot of the stuff that we would talk about in New York. Not everybody disliked In the Groove 2, but I would say at least me and Fat Axel and a few other people got to a point where it was just like, this ain't gonna do it for us. So this is kind of why I'm bringing these points up. But yeah, so another thing I didn't like, the songs felt gimmicky. The songs in the Groove 1 and In the Groove 2 felt like they made these songs specifically for this game, so the songs didn't feel really genuine enough. Like with DDR, you had like really good music. Some of the music in DDR was awesome. It's so deep. Like a lot of these songs were real. A lot of them were real. So deep. One of the coolest sounding songs in DDR at that time. You had a lot of the 2DX stuff sounded amazing. We're talking about like V, A. When Colors came to Extreme, I didn't really mention that in any of my older videos, but Colors was a big deal because that song sounded so cool. That song Sync. There were just a lot of good DDR songs, and In the Groove just felt like they were like, we're gonna make a song to sound like our version of a 10-footer, like Energizer or something. And that's not to say that DDR never did that, but even when they did it just sounded a little bit better, or it had more quality than In the Groove. And a lot of the songs just sounded really gimmicky. July, Juja, those songs really just sounded like they were like, yo, we got to make something like an 11-footer, something a little bit harder than Max 300. We're gonna make it sound like that. We're just gonna use the synthesizers and the piano. So I didn't like that. In the Groove 2 being off sync is not debatable in the sense that like that's objective, in the sense that like if it's off sync, it's off sync. If you're okay with that and you were willing to ignore that and just play sight read, then that's on you. But that was something that was fixed in the future, which I'll probably get around to. But like the machine being different and the song sounding gimmicky, a lot of people also shared that sentiment. But if that didn't bother you because it was a video game, and we're not talking about Mortal Kombat or anything, we're talking about like a dancing game. So that was subjective. Like I didn't like that. It was gimmicky. The steps were really repetitive. They were really repetitive. The steps really just felt like somebody made a bunch of DDR edits. Steps are also subjective. From what I hear after a while, the Step Mania / In the Groove community came up with like standardization, like a generally agreed upon way that you should make step charts. I had come back to play DDR and In the Groove a little bit right before my first daughter was born. And I'll talk to people. I would talk to Gilbert or Spencer or Nick or people who played In the Groove in New York City around 2009, 2010. And they would say like, it's bad if you make people go like up, left, down, or up, right, down, or do crossovers, like 16th note crossovers. And in my head, I had stopped playing for a few years. So I was just like, by now I had stepped away from the community. So when I came back, I was surprised. I was like, by now people should be able to be doing like PSMO like stuff on like 250 beats per minute. But like they were saying like people don't, if you make a step chart or like an edit that makes you do like up, left, down, up, right, down, or crossovers, is considered a bad step chart. So most people don't do that. But like opinions aside, not opinions aside, in my opinion, like the step charts were too repetitive. They were too repetitive. Like it was just like, I don't know. I would love to get the story of like DDR when I played from Konami, the people who worked on DDR, and like what their philosophy was, because I felt like the DDR steps for the most part were really good. I feel like Konami did a good job at making some of those steps. They would go in and out of like following the song to a degree, and then some of it they wouldn't follow the song, so like you had to learn the assist tick. You couldn't just know what the song sounded like. And some of the In the Groove songs, like In the Groove 2 and In the Groove 1, I could basically tell somebody, you know what this song sounds like? That's exactly how the steps are. So in a way that's good, but it's not exciting to me. Again, my opinion, but I didn't like that, and there were a lot of people who agree with me. And then I have gripes with particular songs. I used to hate the Terminator. I thought the Terminator was like, I thought it was like the potential to push a skill that we had not really seen too often in rhythm games, at least from DDR and In the Groove. I can't speak on Pump It Up, but the Terminator, if I remember correctly, had 24th notes in it at like whatever speed it was, anywhere between 130 to 160 beats per minute, however fast the Terminator is. It had 24th notes. I thought that was cool. But then they messed the song up by in the middle of the song, there's just like this air horn, and then they just put a bunch of steps to no music. And when I was like playing in 2005 and I was more passionate about this, I was like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to try to get Fantastics to no music, to an air horn? Like the rest of the song, it goes with the like it goes with it, and then in the middle of the song, it's like this is how we're gonna make it so that nobody gets all Fantastics on this song. And I just thought that was like a lame move. Like they took a song that had potential to be really good and then they messed it up. Even the end is like, the end goes kind of like with the music a little bit, but the middle just destroyed the song. Well, I used to play the Terminator because it was one of the most difficult songs in the game when the game first came out, but after a while I just got sick of it because I was just like, why would I even want to do the middle? That just wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. It was a music game. But like they could have put a freeze arrow there, or they could have just made the song. I think that the Terminator is by is the artist Dust Devil. I'll edit this out if it's not, but like maybe the Terminator is a real song, but like if they couldn't edit the song, they could have just put a freeze arrow there. The rest of the song was difficult, or they could have made another part of the song with music difficult, and I really didn't like that they did that with the Terminator. I don't know. Like, does the In the Groove community like Vertex Squared? Like, how could I don't understand how anybody could actually like the steps to Vertex Squared. That just looked like arrow vomit. That was I think that was one of the first times I remember saying, like, this is just arrow vomit. It just looks like a bunch of somebody threw up a bunch of arrows and just put it there. It like, and I remember when Vertex Squared, like when people started playing it, I was like, it was a difficult song to even pass, so I would play it as a novelty just to like pass it, because a lot of people couldn't even pass the song. But it wasn't fun either, because it was I knew the assist tick to it, but it was just like lines and arrows, and it just wasn't fun. I didn't like Vertex Squared. I just thought it was like those were bad steps. There were other ways to go about making difficult steps than just like arrow vomit. So it was Vertex Squared. The two songs that I initially liked to play on In the Groove 2 were Destiny and Hardcore Symphony, but those songs got tired very quickly as well because the assist tick was very repetitive. Again, this is like something I'm saying over and over. It was very repetitive. Destiny, Hardcore Symphony. What I did like about them initially was that they had these like streams in the beginning, sometimes in the middle, and then the end of the song they had streams. So you didn't really get that too often in DDR. Like they would break it up. And I had a lot of edits on DDR with streams in it, like 16th note streams where your feet are just going. But we didn't get that in like a lot of the official DDR edits. I mean, not edits, the official DDR steps. So it was nice that Destiny and Hardcore Symphony had that, but the assist tick was very repetitive. So those got tired very, very quickly. I used to play, I remember just like in the beginning of In the Groove 2, when I would just play Destiny as my last song, just to get Fantastics on the first stream and then just walk off the pad, because I just didn't even want to stay there to play like the same assist tick for like 20 or 30 seconds and then the same assist tick for another 20 or 30 seconds. So I'd play Hardcore Symphony and Destiny just to get all Fantastics in the beginning and then just walk off the pad for my last song. I used to like Charlene because I liked the way that the song sounded, but then as I got used to playing, I thought that the mine placement was annoying. Keep lifting your feet up. I don't know. I think people, maybe there's a different way to do it now, but I initially liked Charlene because it was like we had never seen anything like that and we didn't have mines in DDR, but I then grew to dislike the steps because of the mines. The mines felt a little forced in Charlene. Those are my gripes with In the Groove 2. I periodically get people when I talk about DDR who ask me about what I think about In the Groove 2, more so when I played. But over the years, if I get into conversations with people about this, they'll ask me. And that's like, for the game itself, that's really what I did not like. My biggest gripe about In the Groove and In the Groove 2 relating to this time especially was the community. It was the community. You know, I spoke about this in my first video. This is like it was like a troll mentality community. People would say stuff that I know that they wouldn't say stuff like that to people in person. Not even on some like they were too scared to say it. It's just like people don't converse like that in person, like in normal conversation. So either something like, for some of the stuff that people used to say, whether they would call people the N-word, I've been called, like I said in my previous video, I've been called the N-word before. People have told me that they wish I died. People say all kinds of crazy stuff, and it seemed more prevalent in these people, like these trolls that played In the Groove 2. I know that they wouldn't say that to people in person, but I know people wouldn't say that stuff to me into my face. So that really drove me away from In the Groove and ultimately DDR. Like, this is one of the main reasons I stopped playing, because of this community, this troll mentality. And like I said, the people who had the ability to kind of put it in check didn't. So there was really nothing you could do about it. If somebody like was running a website, like, Iron in Japan was bad for this. They were bad for this, man. Like, people could say whatever they want on that website a lot of the time. When I was playing anyway, you could put something up, people could go in on you. Nobody would really say, like, the mods, they would just let people go, especially if it was like a prominent player who was being a troll. They could say whatever they want. They wouldn't get checked at all. So that really pushed me away from In the Groove 2. Like, that was the beginning. Like, even before I stopped playing Extreme, I was like, I can't deal with these people anymore. And then there was like the thing that I didn't like also was that there was this like force to move away. It was like forced. It seemed like inauthentic to move away from Extreme. The way that it seemed to me was like people would play Extreme if it suited them. They would cherry pick what tournaments they would go to, or like they would put up an accomplishment. They didn't like Extreme until they AAA something. You know, Extreme's old, Extreme's dying, blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, I AAA'd like, you know, Max Unlimited. Oh, now you play Extreme. You've been playing In the Groove, talking about how In the Groove 2 is the future. Nobody plays DDR. But you AAA Max Unlimited. So you still play. Even if you play one game, you AAA'd it. Now you want to put your accomplishment on. I thought you don't play DDR anymore. That's how it was. It was just like very hypocritical. So it seemed like people were forcing themselves and trying to force the community in the direction of In the Groove, when really what it was that these two communities should have just went like that, and they did. I was told when I came back to play later on that In the Groove and DDR have like their own two communities, and within the In the Groove community that there's apparently like there's like a technical community and there's like a stamina community. I don't really know if DDR is divided up like that. I don't know how accurate this information was. This is what was told to me, but that seemed like it was forced. Like people wanted to move on because they were good at In the Groove too. Until they AAA something on Extreme. you know, like nobody was like, when I would put up option stuff, a lot of the top players, they wouldn't want to acknowledge it. It was like not very many people acknowledged it. I was doing stuff that a lot of these people couldn't even pass. I was getting double A's on stuff that these people couldn't even pass. So if they played it, they would get a C on, or like a B. There was very little acknowledgement for the option stuff. And we had so much to go. There was so much that we could have done with options. And that's not to say that people had to continue to play extreme if they genuinely didn't like it. It just seemed like a lot of the behavior was forced. And you know what? Like, finally, what I'll say about this is in the groove. I'm gonna preface saying this by saying this. I don't think that a lot of people, if anybody watches this video who's like part of the In the Groove community or started playing DDR recently or like after 2006 or 2007, I don't think you're gonna understand really. Like, you won't really be able to embody what I'm trying to say. In the Groove and In the Groove 2 was very one dimensional as a game and as a community. What I mean by that is you play with speed, you play with the bar, and you try to get as many fantastics as you can. Now that's good for score, but in the beginning days of DDR and a lot of the videos that I've made so far, and a lot of the emphasis that I put on my older videos was talking about freestyle, and like when people were still excited to pass stuff, and like how exciting 10-footers were when they came out, bar versus no bar. There was like, and then like I didn't really get into it too much, but like when I played with when me and Reflex played with JSB, and then in the Jacob Javits 2005 and then the 2006 tournaments, it was Iron Man. They would take the bars off. It wasn't even like a score thing. It was like a stamina thing. Well, that's the way I liked to play Iron Man. Though Iron Man was cool. It was just straight stamina. It wasn't even like score. There was so many different facets of DDR in the old days, especially like freestyle versus perfect attack. But there was just so many ways to play, and just it was so fun to play, you know. And in the groove, it was just like grab onto the bar and get perfects, flat foot, don't twist, no twisting, and then, to the point where they even, like I said, they even were like, don't put up, left, down, up, right, down, and no twist. They were even telling people like how to make the step charts. It just seemed very one-dimensional, and I don't think I had the foresight, or I didn't have like the 10,000 foot overview to verbalize that to myself or my friends back then. But that's a lot of what it was. It was really just play like this. New York was very unique as well, and I'll admit that. I don't know, it seemed like freestyle, it seemed like a lot of these different elements of DDR in the beginning existed in other places. You go on YouTube, you see old videos of California freestyle DDR and freestyle tournaments in places all over the country, 2001, 2002, 2003. All that kind of stuff. But like, I'm not saying that in the groove didn't have freestyle. I think I remember seeing freestyle, but it wasn't the same. It was just like the In the Groove community supports bar, speed, quad star, eventually quad star. Like over 99% of quad star, whatever the people were trying to do at the time. And only score mattered under the bar speed conditions, and that's all that mattered in the groove. And to me, that also wasn't fun. In the Groove is like a very prominent game. I've explained that I appreciated what Rockstar did, because Konami, they basically abandoned the DDR community. They stopped making arcade mixes, so I appreciate the effort. And I don't know, maybe In the Groove was meant to be more than just like a difficult score game. Maybe it wasn't, but maybe they meant to do that. But that's kind of where everybody took it, and it really wasn't like fun. That wasn't why I started playing DDR. All my older videos explain how fun and how invigorating it was to play back then. The last thing I'll say about like my gripes, say the last thing I'll say. I don't know. Like I don't know how much longer this rant is gonna go on for. But like, what I'll say is, this is something that I would love to have a conversation with somebody, like somebody else who may either very much agree or very much disagree with me, or a game developer, like, I don't know, the guy who makes Tekken, like Harada, or somebody who is into like the evolution of video games. I really enjoyed the cadence of the evolution of DDR. And what I mean by that is, at first, when I started playing DDR at the end of third mix, it was like, I kid you not, Afro Nova and Paranoia Rebirth were almost like passing Max 300. They were like on the same level as Max 300. It was like mind blowing. Dead End. It was mind blowing to see somebody play Paranoia Evolution and to hit all the twists. If somebody full comboed these songs in front of you, it was like, forget it. You would lose your mind. It was crazy. I don't know. Like, I don't know if Konami accidentally evolved DDR the way they did, but they did a really beautiful job in doing it in the early days of DDR. Third mix, second mix, third mix, fourth mix, you know, had a few more songs that were tricky and a little difficult. There were songs on fourth mix that were hard. There was I think one of the Xanadu steps on fourth mix. One of them had like, it was a difficult steps. And then there was another song on fourth mix called I think it was called Night of Fire. Be the light of my fire. It was that song, whatever song that was. I'll put it up when I find it. But the beginning, that whole song was like, it was like going in the direction of a 10 footer, and it was like fourth mix. They never put those steps back in DDR. So whenever I would see a fourth mix, it may have been like fourth mix or fourth mix plus, but I would always go to that song. I was like, yo, I gotta play this, because I never got to play that song. But when I started playing it, I was like already like really good, and there was no speed in fourth mix, so I used to like playing that. They evolved it, and then you had fifth mix with a plethora of 9-footers, you know. And back then we used to call them katas because it was short for catastrophic. Konami had names for the amount of feet. The one was called Paramount. I don't remember the other ones, but 9-footers were called catastrophic, so we would call them katas for short. And you know, fifth mix had a lot of 9-footers. Can't Stop Falling in Love, Speed Mix, Rhythm and Police, Furahada's theme. So like they kind of like, they fed it to us little by little, and we couldn't keep up with it, but it was like just enough to not be overwhelming. You had a few people trickle in, and then the rest of the community gradually followed. It wasn't like such a huge jump. Max 300 was a huge jump, but it was only one 10-footer. And then in 7th mix, there was only one new 10-footer, so that was 2 10-footers total. And then in Extreme, there were different steps. So Deep, while it wasn't a 10-footer, was like, in my opinion, it was a profound step chart, because like we had never seen that type of galloping, and the whole song was galloping. So you have stuff like that, Bag, and then you know, the 5 or so new 10-footers, but that was it. It was just like little by little, and keeping in mind you had Paranoid Survivor Max. Well, even before that, you had Paranoid Survivor. So to be able to do twists at 270 beats per minute was new to us. It was just like, it was like this one or two things every once in a while that was new. And then, you know, PSMO with all the twists. It was just like, and PSMO really probably should have been an 11-footer. It was really in a league of its own. But they just kind of, the cadence of the way that they evolved DDR, to me, was really good. Now, we always had Step Mania. And Step Mania was like, if you got to play your favorite fighting game and put any character you wanted into the fighting game, and you can make all of their moves super powerful, unblockable, or like make all the characters frames, you know, super advantageous. That's kind of what Stepmania was like. And a few of us, like, I had a Cobalt Flux pad, or no, I initially I had a metal pad. I don't know what the name of the pad was, but I had a metal pad. So I'll be at home playing Stepmania. I'll full combo a lot of these songs, you know. I think there was a song called, there was like a bunch of songs, or one song, Dragon Force. So I'll play that at home. I would put it on speed, grab onto like my sofa, and like that was my bar, and I'd play that stuff. I'd be playing like all of the DDR East Invasion packs, and all of the Bamani Ruler packs, and I had pretty good scores on some of that stuff. It's just that, like, when you played at home back then anyway, none of that really mattered. Like, you didn't really boast about it because it was at home and it was on Stepmania. Stepmania was so editable. So even if you did get a good score on a Stepmania song, you didn't really like it. I don't remember it being like there wasn't really a place for you to, like, as a DDR player on foot, to go and be like, I full combo Bamani Ruler A on Stepmania at home. Before Extreme, like, there was no place to say that, because like it was at home. If it was at home, you know, it was at home. Like, nobody wanted to hear about it. But it was, Stepmania was like a fantasy. Like, it was nice, but it was like a fantasy, and we just wanted to have fun. But if you think about it, to put all that stuff into a game, like into actual DDR, it advances the community too quickly. And it cracks it open, and it messes up the cadence of the community. And again, part of this is Konami's fault, because if they had kept making mixes, they could have controlled that. And the 10 footers that they came out with after that, I feel like it kept up with that, especially Paranoia Respect, Max 300, Super Max Me Mix, or whatever it was called. Max Period was a little OD because of the end, but the steps weren't hard. It was just 600 beats per minute, right? So you had all that, and Konami stopped making these mixes. So now it's up to this company, Rockstar. They make In the Groove too, and then they put these songs on their game. And I think it was like 2 to 5 years ago was when the entire game of In the Groove 2 was quad starred or something like that. Like, the last song, I don't know if it was the Terminator or whatever, Vertex Squared or whatever it was quad starred. It was like they jumped the gun, like they messed up the cadence, and I don't think they meant to. I think that they just wanted to make these challenging, fun step charts for people. But Konami had a good cadence, and I appreciated Konami's cadence. They stopped making games after DDR Extreme for a while. It was from 2002 to 2006 that they didn't really make anything new for arcades. And then when In the Groove and In the Groove 2 came out, like, I feel like the cadence was messed up a little bit. Konami had a good handle on that, and it got messed up. So that's my opinion. Like, maybe that doesn't matter to a lot of people, but like, it was so exciting. A new 10 footer. Oh my God, you see the new 10 footer? Like, or like a new weird 9 footer. All that stuff was super exciting, and it wasn't exciting anymore. It was like all the thrill was gone, because all of this stuff had just been released, all these 24th notes and all of these crazy, you know, songs. So that's really what it was, and what I didn't like. That was just like the unintended consequence of like losing the novelty of like exciting new stuff in these games. If you ask 19-year-old Anthony Sketch, do you want to see like 24th notes in a game, the next DDR? I would say, yeah, like that would have been crazy. Let's go, let's do it. But as I got to understand it, not even now, like years and years ago, I would have been like, no, like, stretch it out, like, make it fun. There was like 10 to 15 years worth of video game, rhythm game stuff in the Groove too. So that was it. Like, what more could you do if you come out with something new? You're gonna put like, you know, 16th notes at like 1,000 beats per minute. That may exist now, but like, that's not like that cadence. It got messed up, you know. Nothing was like new and difficult because it had already been out. One thing I wanted to mention, especially about it being off sync before I move on to the next part of this video, is that before they fixed In the Groove 2, and they did fix it eventually, they fixed it after I stopped playing, but they did fix In the Groove 2. I grabbed a bunch of songs that I liked: Summer, Destiny, Hardcore Symphony, Maybe Know Your Enemy, Bend Your Mind, Hand of Time, and I made edits to them, but I didn't change the steps. What I did was I took the entire song and I moved them earlier. And I mentioned this in the Groove 1. I'm just mentioning it now because I actually did this when In the Groove 2 was out. So I took all these steps and I just copied the entire step chart in Stepmania and moved them up by, like, I don't know, I may have tested this a couple times. Like, I would do it and then bring my edits to CF and then be like, oh, it's still late. Do it again and bring it to CF and be like, oh, they're a little early. I moved them up a little bit, like earlier, like everything I moved up as like a 32nd of a note or a 64th of a note. And I got it to a point where they were actually synchronized with the music. And when they were synchronized, it was very easy for me to get 99s on a lot of this stuff. And that's how I knew. Like, I was just stepping, like I've been saying in my previous videos, I was stepping to the beat of the song while the arrow lined up with the stationary arrow. And that's how I knew In the Groove was off sync at first. So that was like a very long-winded rant about what I didn't like about In the Groove. I mean, I do want to express what I didn't like because this is my DDR series, but this sentiment was shared with some of the other DDR players who did play In the Groove. Here's what I liked about In the Groove. It ushered in new players. There was like a whole group of new players or people who were somewhat interested in DDR who like really caught wind of In the Groove too, and it like that was like their identity. The way that DDR players like us identify with playing DDR, and that was the video game that we preferred. And there were people who like didn't even really play DDR like that. They played, but then In the Groove 2 came out. It was like they were like, that was their game. You know, I again, to give Chris Beast credit, like he pushed In the Groove 2, man. He used to play that game a lot. He would come up, he's one of the only people I actually saw freestyle on In the Groove 2. He'd come up with freestyles to like the disconnected songs, and Roxa should have paid Chris because Chris was like pushing In the Groove 2. He really he made it look fun. Like Chris was one of the people who played In the Groove 2 and made it look fun to play. So, you know, me and Chris, that's the homie. Chris is a good friend of mine. Me and him go way back. We have a long history. And, you know, he played DDR with me. He played Extreme with me. And Chris was relatively good at Extreme. But he really played In the Groove too. And, you know, maybe if I can get Chris up where I live and interview him, I would love to. He could talk about that better than I can, but Chris, he really like embodied In the Groove too, and I thought that was cool. But there was also like players who played DDR who like leveled up, and I really liked and always respected people like Spencer, Gilbert, Nick, especially Spencer and Nick. Like they really pushed the game forward, and I don't really know what the politics of In the Groove 2 were back then, but like I always wanted to see like Spencer be like the best In the Groove 2 player in the country or whatever, you know. But like Spencer is up there as far as I know. He was up there when I would periodically check in. I'd pop into an arcade, you know, in the middle of like college classes, you know. When I stopped playing DDR, or like I was briefly involved in the Tekken community, so I would go to CF and I would talk to whoever was by the machine at the time, and Spencer always seemed like he was like pushing the game forward. But Spencer, Nick, Gilbert, like they really did. It seemed like they did a lot for the game in New York City.
Another thing I liked about In the Groove 2 is, regardless of my opinions on In the Groove 2,
they picked up Konami's slack. That's something that I've mentioned in my previous In the Groove video, and that's something that I've mentioned a couple times already. Just because I liked DDR and I didn't like In the Groove 2 doesn't mean that what Rockstar and In the Groove 2 did was bad. Like, I don't even know what dancing games would have been if it wasn't for In the Groove. Because we all know, or like, I don't even really know the complete story, but the general consensus is that like once Rockstar made In the Groove and In the Groove 2 and Konami caught wind of it, they sued Rockstar and then they kind of shut them down. And maybe from a legal standpoint it makes a lot of sense, but like, you develop this revolution, like no pun intended, this revolution of players playing this new type of video game. Dance Dance Revolution was not a controller video game. It was not a joystick and button video game. Like, you were dancing with your feet. You not only did you create a new video game, you created like this potential fitness revolution. And so many people lost weight over playing DDR. There's been like people on the news talking about how much weight they lost playing DDR. And then they just dropped it, even at home version. You know, and you know, this is what I like about In the Groove 2, because this is what I don't like about what Konami did, you know. And a lot of other video games converted because arcades were dying. So what you had is a lot of these companies, these big companies like Konami, Namco, Capcom, you name it, like all these big companies, they saw this coming. So when they were making home versions, if the game required more than just a controller, they would make it so that people can play on a professional level at home. And the best example of this is the fighting game community and the fighting game companies. A lot of people do play fighting games on like their PlayStation pad or their Xbox pad or whatever, right? But a lot of these companies and third-party companies knew that arcades were dying. There was really no feasible way to make these big, giant arcade cabinets. So they made arcade sticks, $150, $200, $300. You could play Street Fighter 4 at the time. Like, Street Fighter 4 came out in 2009. So when they came out, you could play it at home after a year or whatever it was in the arcade. You just buy yourself a $150 stick. They even had sticks, like arcade quality sticks, that were less than $100. You buy the game, you buy your stick, that's it, you're set. There's no need to go to the arcade. You can, this is not even talking about online. I'm talking about, like, you know, you could play at your friend's house, or people could come over and play. And you play online, forget it. Like, you're good. Like, they got it. They understood. You can go buy if I go to Micro Center or I go to Best Buy, you can buy if you're into racing games, you could buy wheels. You know, like they have the gas pedal. You could buy stick shift racing games. You watch people play like space simulator games like Elite Dangerous or Star Citizen. You can have the whole thing set up where you have all your controls and like you're in a spaceship. DDR is the only game, Konami is the only company that didn't do this. They didn't make a way for people to play at home. To play at home like in a meaningful way. Those plastic pads were not made to play like Paranoia Survivor Max Sony. Nobody was gonna. If there was a community of people that was like a home DDR community where like people were playing on like the home pads, I didn't really know about it. I don't really think that existed. There were people who played at home, and there were people who played at home that were really good. And at the time, the premier pad back when I played were the Cobalt Flux pads, and they were okay, but they still weren't DDR quality. Konami did make a metal DDR pad that I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, but they must have discontinued that. I've never known anybody who had that pad. I've never seen that pad in real life. I just remember there was like a set of pictures that floated around DDR Freak that you could still kind of find on the internet if you dig around, and that's it. So this battle has been fought since pretty much since I stopped playing DDR, or even before I stopped playing DDR, where people try to figure out how to play DDR reliably at home, and people make their own pads, and then you got the Stepmania X or Stepmania X pads but those are difficult to get. Every time they go on sale, they sell out within minutes. Then people buy that. That's it, really. That's it. That's really the only way to play arcade quality at home. Is Stepmania X, Stepmania, however you say it, or buying a machine. Nobody, like, people don't have like $4,000 to $20,000 to drop on like an In the Groove or DDR machine, let alone the space. Something I want to touch on when I talk about like the dynamics of New York City DDR in a different video, but like the space and the money, that's cost prohibitive. Like, people don't have that kind of money. And you're lucky if you get a Stepmaniacs pad. You're lucky if you like mash on the button on the website and you actually get one, to have the $2,000 like keyed up. So Konami could have come out with, they could have made like a $1,000 to $2,000 DDR pad so that people could do this at home. People could imagine like the tournaments that this community could make, where all you got to do is transport like these pads. You just transport the pad. You got to do the machine or anything. You get like a very low latency or lagless, LCD TV. You can make like a beautiful setup. Fighting game tournaments do this all the time. And I think it's awesome that Roxor really saw an opportunity, but they saw that Konami wasn't doing anything. So they made this video game so that we can continue to have something to play. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had anything to play. I could rant about like how Konami really dropped the ball for a very long time. I think it sucked that Konami did that. Another thing I appreciate about In the Groove, this is not something I came to my own realization about, but something that, like I said earlier in this video, somebody pointed out to me. DDR and In the Groove are two different games. They're very similar. The arrow setup is essentially the same, but they are two different games. The same way that Tekken and Virtua Fighter are two different games. Virtua Fighter definitely influenced Tekken. They're both 3D fighting games. Especially when they first came out, they had a lot of similarities, but they're different games. They're not the same game. Crash Team Racing and Mario Kart are two different games. Very similar, but also different. League of Legends and Dota are similar, but they're different games. And that's the thing with DDR, and that part of that is because of the community push. But like, these are kids, like people who were playing In the Groove, they were kids, like, so they were going to do whatever they wanted to do. But at the end of the day, I wish I had the foresight to be like, don't worry about this game. You don't like this game, Anthony? That's on you. That's fine. Let the people who want to play this game. Continue to play DDR and just go in that direction. And like I said, there may be people who watch this video and they'd be like, we've always known it was two different games. You're just late to the party. That may be the case with the community now, but I'm talking from firsthand experience. It wasn't like this in 2005. People were really just trying to push the 4-panel, the up down. I'll just say the up down left right rhythm game community from DDR into In the Groove. It was very like I said, like people in between, like, trolling and like saying wild stuff on these forums. People would just be like, "Oh, you still play Extreme?" Like, nobody plays that anymore, which wasn't true. Like, they would, in between like snide little comments or remarks or like insults, they would also be like, they would try to shame people for playing DDR. But these two games were different, and I really wish that I recognized that early on. Call of Duty and Counter-Strike, similar, but they're different. They're both first-person shooters. If somebody's good at Call of Duty, are they likely to be better than, like, say a top player in Call of Duty plays Counter-Strike? They're probably going to be better than a lot of Counter-Strike players. But they're different games. Like, doesn't mean just because somebody is the best Call of Duty player, they're going to be the best Counter-Strike player. And I'm just using that as an example. I don't really play either one of those games competitively. This is just like an anecdote. But you get my point, right? Like, so that's what I liked about In the Groove. They made a game. They made a game to fill a void, but it actually is a different game. To wrap this video up, I will say, like, the story of how In the Groove, like, this part of this game kind of like faded into, I guess, what it is right now, or like where in the direction that it went to get to where it is now is Konami, the company who made DDR, they weren't making any more DDR mixes. Roxor, the company who made In the Groove and In the Groove 2. Konami sued them. I don't know if it was like a patent thing or a copyright infringement thing or both, but they sued them because In the Groove was very similar to DDR. And I don't know how the lawsuit played out, but I think Konami is essentially the reason why In the Groove shut down. They stopped making In the Groove. What In the Groove is now is it's like a game that came out in 2005 that people have modified and edited to no end. You know, there's like it's basically like I guess I don't know if people are like In the Groove players are like comfortable with just saying that they play Stepmania now on like an arcade machine. I think that's basically what people do, right? Like there are different versions of dance simulation games that you can put on your computer, and people, I don't know if people install In the Groove 2 because it's like the official game, and then they overlay like a theme, like a Stepmania theme. Most people have the Simply Love theme, which is pretty awesome. Like I have Stepmania on my computer, and that's the theme that I use. I think that's the theme that most people use. And then people just add songs. I don't know, like there's gotta be a few 100,000 step charts, good, bad, or otherwise, of people on the internet since when Stepmania was first released all the way up until now. I think there's like, if I had to guess, I don't know this, but if I had to guess, there's probably a general consensus of like the community, and everybody agrees that like these step chart artists are people who make step charts for like Stepmania and In the Groove. Like these people know what they're doing. We agree that they make good step charts. So they're going to come out with a pack, which is a group of songs. They're going to release this pack and people use it in tournaments, I assume. But it's I'm speaking from the community from a technical standpoint. It seems like a very resilient community. Mentioned in one of my previous videos, like while Konami still seems to not quite understand how to sync things perfectly, Stepmania and In the Groove community has figured out how to do this. It's like almost to a science. Like they have tools to help you do this, and there's like guides you can go on somebody every few years. I ask somebody to link this to me because I always lose the link, but like there's like people have written out like step-by-step guides on how to synchronize songs perfectly. You just gotta follow it, and then like you could be like you could be a beginner step chart artist. You follow this guide and your song will be sync. So I think that the community is really resilient for that, and I really think that's cool. It's just unfortunate that a game that tried to do something positive got shut down by the company that caused the game to be made in the first place. And then Konami came out with Supernova, and Supernova to me was a crappy mix on crappy hardware. I have 2 more videos to make after this, and one of them is like a 2006 recap video, and I'll talk about Supernova a little bit. I don't want to take up too much time about that, but Supernova was like the answer, I guess. I don't know if Konami was like, oh no, they're making like a new dancing game, we're gonna sue them, and then now we're gonna make a new DDR mix, and that was Supernova, and I thought Supernova was a crappy mix. So In the Groove, they really did that. What it did is good, and it's unfortunate that the people who love the game, like good people who love the game, are relegated to this. Like it's not even really an official game. It's like an open source game, and that may be a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. If Konami had been making DDR mixes, I don't think that would have happened. I don't necessarily know that those two communities would have evolved to the way that they did. And to a lot of people, maybe they're okay with that. They're okay with the way the communities evolved, but that was Stepmania. Sorry, In the Groove was the result of Konami ignoring the DDR community. And then getting scared when they saw that In the Groove was actually gaining traction in America and other places in the world. So I do like that. But just to wrap this video up, the competitive vibe of New York was like all the people who were good at DDR Extreme were good at In the Groove too at first. I played the songs that I play. I didn't really care what the community thought. I would play my songs. I just wanted to get 99% on songs. People weren't really quad starring stuff back then because they hadn't fixed the game yet. So I got my 99%. I wanted under 10 excellence on Destiny, Hardcore Symphony, Know Your Enemy, and I think that's really all I cared. That's really all I cared about. Like I was trying to force myself to like In the Groove too, and I got under 10 excellence on those songs, and that's really all I cared about. I have a quick funny story. If you may or may not follow the fighting game community if you play video games, but in New York City we had a group of fighting game players named Empire. Now the people in Empire, them themselves, they weren't bad people necessarily. The guy who ran Empire though was like he had an interesting take on video games. I'm choosing my words very carefully. I'm being very generous with my words because like you don't even have to take my word for it. If you go and Google Triforce or look up Triforce in any of the fighting game documentaries, you'll see what I'm talking about. But at first, I knew a lot of people in Empire. I was good friends with Twisted Jago, who was in Empire, because at the time he dated my friend Sarah. I fights real well, so I was good friends with him. And so him and Sarah would hang out with the Empire people. And they would always tell me that the Empire people did not regard Dance Dance Revolution or music games as real video games. They said they didn't think they were real video games. Cool, right? So Empire never really it didn't seem like they really very much liked the DDR players. And I'm going to talk about this in my 2005 video and my 2006 video because there are other stories related to Empire where we kind of briefly crossed paths. But they didn't regard DDR as a real video game or In the Groove. But at some point, I don't know why, the leader of this group, Triforce, changed his mind about this. And then he started trying to get people into DDR and In the Groove. Now, I didn't like this because he's only doing it to try to capitalize or like be a vulture to DDR. DDR had been out for so many years. They didn't think it was a real video game until like the Jacob Javits tournament where there's like big money involved. And back then, this is before fighting games were like blowing up. This is before Street Fighter 4. So like $1,000 for a Jacob Javits tournament type thing was a lot of money. So now maybe Triforce, the wheels start turning in his head, and he's just like, I could make money. So he starts trying to recruit people into Empire. I don't want to like put people on blast, or I don't want to like claim that somebody was in Empire and they actually weren't. But there were some DDR players who were gullible enough to join Empire, I guess, at this time, right? But I like me and my friends, we did not want anything to do with Empire. Like, if I knew people on an individual level, that's one thing. Like Andre or Jago, that was one thing. But I didn't want to like have anything to do with the group or anything. But I really didn't like that all of a sudden they were interested in trying to recruit people. And I caught wind of this. Like, you know, I knew everything that happened in New York City DDR. I used to tell people nothing moves in the city without me knowing about it. So I caught wind of this. And, you know, Empire was very protective of their scores. They wanted high scores. I think Triforce was in the Guinness Book of Records for like some Pac-Man or something. I don't know what he did. So they were trying to get into DDR. So I was on the In the Groove 2 machine one day. And I'm playing In the Groove 2 in Chinatown Fair. That's where they were most of the time. And he's watching me play. Him and a couple of other guys are watching me play. But he's really watching me play. So I see him watching me play. And I don't know if he knew that I was like the best DDR player in New York and one of the best in the world or whatever, but I think he knew I was at least good. So I'm watching him watch me play. So I get like a really high score on like a bunch of the stuff that I do. I think this is the time that I got like, I don't know, like 5 excellence or 4 excellence on Destiny or whatever. And I played 2 other songs. I had the high score on the machine for all these songs. So you put your initials at the end, and instead of putting like whatever I used to put, I don't know if I put SKE, I put EMPR. That's what they used to put for Empire. And I watched him watch me do this. And he looked so baffled because he knew I wasn't an Empire. He knew I didn't really associate with him. But there was nothing he could do about this because he had nobody in the DDR community who was even close to as good as I was. He approaches me. He goes, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Why did you put that on the machine?" I said, "Because I wanted to." He said, "Did anybody tell you could put that, like put those initials?" I said, "No." He said, "Why'd you do that?" I said, "Because I wanted to." And it was funny. That was the end of the conversation because he had like absolutely zero pull in the DDR community. If this was the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or Tekken 4 or whatever, he could have sent one of his people to come through and watch me and take my score down. There was nobody in the DDR community who was gonna come close to like any score on any machine that I was playing on in Empire because they had no pull. Anybody who was even close to as good as me, I would have found out about it. And Chris Fire and Dino were not gonna join Empire. Nobody in DDPD was gonna join Empire. BigMatt wasn't gonna join Empire, not at least at that time. I don't know if Matt ever like joined Empire, but like back then anyway, he wouldn't. And I would have talked anybody out of that. If I found that any one of the DDR players were like thinking about entertaining that idea, I would have talked them out of it. So this is one of the few times where like I saw Empire trying to like eke their way into the DDR community, and because of how they regarded the game, I didn't want them to have any part in it. So I put Empire in front of him just to troll him, to be like, I'm putting this, I'm not an Empire, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Nobody who plays DDR in the groove in Empire can come even close to any of the scores that I put on this machine. So that's one of 2 or 3 stories I have where I briefly crossed paths with them. And there's a lot of people in Empire that like I always admired on an individual level. I love watching IFC Yipes. I enjoy a lot of the content that Sanford Kelly puts out, and like I said, I'm good friends with Andre Twisted Jago. But like the group as a whole, especially Triforce, it was a very opportunistic kind of thing. And they had zero appreciation for the DDR community. And if they did have any appreciation for the DDR community, he would have come and talked to me. He would have got shot down anyway. Like I said, nothing moved in the DDR community in New York City without me knowing about it. So they wouldn't have been able to do anything without my approval, like in terms of scores or winning tournaments. But he didn't. He just started trying to scoop people up, and I didn't like that. So that's my In the Groove 2 video. I felt like I have to talk about it. That is one of my bigger rants about In the Groove 2 as well. And this is like, the next video I'm going to talk about like the 2005 Jacob Javez Digital Life tournament. But this video is like just like a brain dump of like why I didn't really like In the Groove 2. And like I did mention people who played, and there were people who advanced the game forward. And I do remember like Fat Axel, even Fat Axel played it for a little bit longer than me, I think. Adam STF played it. Chris Fire, Dino, BigMatt, and they kept going with it for a while from what I remember. Fat Axel not so much, but Chris Fire, Dino, BigMatt, Chris Beast, Adam STF, they played in the groove for a little while. They played, and they would get good scores, 99% and so on and so forth. I didn't really get into it in this video, but in my previous video I did mention that like they eventually fixed In the Groove 2. They came like right around the time that Konami sued In the Groove. They came out with like a update, and I explained this in my first In the Groove video. But before this update, a lot of the good players were like, I don't feel like In the Groove 2 is off sync. I don't feel like it's late. But there were not very many quad stars, and I remember they came out with this update where they actually synchronized everything later on down the line. And then the next day you went on Aaron in Japan, and all the good players had quad stars. They quadded. They went to the arcade after this update. They quadded a bunch of stuff because they synchronized the game. I don't know if that was R16. And then they came out with another one called, I think, R18 or R19, which I think was the one where they let you, it was either R18 or R21 where they let you put Stepmania files on the game. This was after, like, I guess they knew that they were going down. I don't know if somebody hacked the game or Rockstar was just like, you know what, we're not going to exist anymore, so here you go. And they like opened the game where they let people just put Stepmania files on. And that was when people could load up an In the Groove 2 machine with hundreds and hundreds of songs. You could hear Britney Spears songs. You could hear like hip hop songs. Like anybody that wanted to make a step chart to anything, they could make it. And then just, if you knew the arcade owner, you could, you could actually, I think maybe R18 was like, they let you put it on the machine, and R21 was you just had to put it on your thumb drive or whatever. But yeah, they just opened the game up so that you could just put whatever. It would have been the equivalent of like a fighting game, allowing you to put whatever character you wanted that you can create on like their fighting game with whatever properties you wanted to. So, but yeah, like there were people who played, and that vibe went in its own direction. I continued to play DDR after I realized I didn't really like In the Groove 2. So did Fat Axel. And then like people like BigMatt, Chris Fire, Dino, they played both. And you know, maybe this was congruent to the tournament in South Beach Arcade that I was talking about in my previous video. But I kept playing options. Fat Axel kept playing options, and we just kept going forward with 2005. So, you know, if you played In the Groove 2 and you watched this video, especially if you played back then, let me know. If I got anything wrong, let me know. Like I'm not making this video to like completely bash the In the Grooves community. If you watch the whole video, there's a lot of things I didn't like about In the Groove, but there are things that I do like about In the Groove. So, you know, maybe I said R19 when I was supposed to say R17 or whatever. Let me know if I got anything wrong. Or if you played In the Groove 2 when In the Groove 2 came out, let me know what it was like. And especially if you played in New York City, let me know what it was like. And I'll be back with another video soon. So thanks for watching.